Regresamos ahora en la transmisión. Vamos a salir definitivamente por una de ellas, por lo menos YouTube. Así que voy a empezar el día de hoy otra vez. We are going to start again with Aisha Serbari. She represents Minnesota Legal Aid. She is a tax attorney. And I mean, we have one of the best guests today. Y tenemos hoy día uno de los mejores invitados el día de hoy. Thank you so much, Aisha. I know we have this kind of, I guess, technical problem, but I guess it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Especially in this time in Minnesota, we are learning a lot. Okay, now we start with you. Thank you so much for helping with this important information. I know we have a lot of questions from taxpayers regarding this, especially legal issues. The question number one was, what about I debt, I owe money to the IRS. What is the best path for me to handle this?
Yeah, so if someone owes money to the IRS, there's a couple different options. The first one, is if you learn of it when you file a return, for example, you can make a payment with your return, or you can make payments within 6 months of filing the tax return. They're called like short-term payment plans, where you essentially pay it off in like a short amount of time. But as someone, my clients, they're not able to afford to make that payment, or like perhaps any payments. And so there are things called collection alternatives with both the IRS and on a state level with the Minnesota Department of Revenue. So if you have both types of debt, and you can set up an installment agreement or a payment plan, so you pay a small amount over up to 6 years. So that can be manageable for some people, just making a small monthly amount. If someone's unable to make any sort of payment, they can get on what's called collection suspension, where the IRS won't collect against them for a temporary period of time. It can be renewed. And the state does that as well, for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months at a time, so that you can kind of figure out your finances and do potentially the third option, which is an offer. So you can offer to settle the debt for less the amount owed. So if you owe a lot or for a certain number of years, that can be a really great option.
Okay, regarding the last option, which I guess a lot of people is looking for that, since the interest, is still accruing, and this is really dangerous for a lot of people. What is the best option for you, since you are a tax attorney and you technically probably figured out the way to reach the IRS? As a regular taxpayer, how the person can reach the IRS and make an offer in case the offer is rejected, can send another offer again? I mean, what options they have?
Yeah. So for offers specifically, with the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, there's actually a packet, a 656B packet. And so people fill that out, and then depending on your situation, there is a filing fee of $205, but you might be able to have that waived if you meet 250% or less of the federal poverty guidelines. There's a little table in the packet that will tell you if you're low income certified. And if that's the case, then you can apply without a fee or doing a down payment or anything. But you fill out the 656B, which is two main forms, a 433A OIC, which is all your financial information. It lists all of your assets, your income, and your expenses. And you want to make sure you're as specific as you can be with that, because it'll make things easier in the longer term when you're talking to the IRS. And then if you have a business, then you do a 433B as well. And then there's the 656 form where you make your offer amount. So you use the 433A or 433B to calculate an offer amount. And then you actually put that offer forward on the 656. You mail it all to the IRS. I recommend certified mail, so you have tracking of it. And then the IRS should send you within 3 months of you submitting it a letter saying we've received it and now we're going to process it. And then someone should be in contact with you to go over, what you submitted. Usually you submit bank statements with it. They might want updated bank statements or financials, is what we call it. And they can, then they'll say whether the offer is accepted or rejected or returned. If it is returned, if there's a specific reason, like maybe you needed to pay that fee and you didn't, you just submit another one. If it's rejected, then you look at, well, why was it rejected? You can appeal that. And
Okay.
then, based on that appeal, then you can submit another one if you need to.
How many times you can appeal?
You can, if you do it like just the normal route of doing an offer, you can appeal once,
Okay.
like for that specific offer.
Okay. What about if the accounting make a mistake? I remember many times IRS keep saying this is your choice, but how you can actually help yourself to bring a case to the IRS is not technically your fault.
Yeah, if you believe there was some type of tax preparer misconduct, for example, where the tax preparer caused the error or issue, or did something on the return that you didn't agree with or know about or anything like that, then you can do prepare a misconduct form and affidavit and actually report that to the IRS. Otherwise, or in addition to that, when you contact the IRS, you can provide them all the information that they need, and then they can figure out, okay, like, was this like an error that is attributable to you, the taxpayer, or is it something else going on?
Perfect. Now the other question is, this is going for people they're asking questions about. Okay, now this year they are afraid to file taxes, even if they have good credit. I mean, we in Minnesota we still have credits. Can you explain more about the credits in Minnesota? What kind of
Yeah.
credits people they can have?
Yeah, the credits are really important in Minnesota. First in the nation to be offering the Minnesota Child Tax Credit and advance payments for those tax credits. So it's really beneficial in that sense of things, and you have to file a tax return to get the money that you deserve to have, like, as a taxpayer. And if for that Minnesota child tax credit, for example, it's $1,750 up to per child, so it's a substantial amount. And so it's really beneficial to file your taxes to get that credit. The working family credit is another one that if you have earned income, then you can qualify for that credit. There's also your renter's rebate credit. If
Correct.
if you're a renter, that's a very important credit. So they all add up to a lot, right? And there's also the K through 12 subtraction credit. So if you pay for school supplies, you can get some of that back, or if you pay for after school programs or different things like that. So there's a huge financial benefit, and you have to file the tax return, Minnesota state tax return, in order to get those credits now. And so it can be, it can be really beneficial for families to take advantage. And then for the advanced portion of the child tax credit, if you want to get up to half of the amount of your credit in 3 payments in the year, that you have to elect that on your tax return. So a lot of families didn't realize it, in this past year, that they had to elect it on their tax return. So if you elect it on your 2025 tax return for 2026. And so just making sure people are aware of that as well.
That's perfect. Now we understand the beautiful bill change um, slightly. And can you explain to us what is the biggest changes, especially for low income people?
Yeah, with the One Big Beautiful Bill, there were quite a few different changes going on. I mean, the ones that, impact some of the people the most are, the no tax on tips, which is a set amount per year depending on your filing status. And then it actually, what happens is you calculate your income and you use your W 2, and then there's another form the employer might give, or you can fill out if you receive cash tips, for example. You kind of take all of your, wage documents that you have received, calculate your income, and then there's a spot on the tax return that allows you to deduct up to a certain amount of tips. And so that can be really beneficial, obviously, for people as a part of the new bill. And then the no tax on like overtime. So for a certain amount of time and a half, then there won't be tax on those portion of things. And then there's also a deduction for seniors now, a personal deduction. There aren't deductions in other categories, right now. And then the standard deduction was increased for each filing status. So those are kind of the four major takeaways from the One Big Beautiful Bill that I think impact the most people.
But that's apply only for people they are low income, correct?
They're primarily based for those that are low income,
Okay,
yes.
because as soon they make more, obviously they are not able to get the benefits of that kind of.
Yeah, it just depends on, yeah, like your filing status and then how much you make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like because you have a tips, but if you make more of
Yeah.
more money, I mean, I'm sorry, you cannot get that credit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like because it's like taboo. Oh, we can get anything. No, you can't because you make so much money. Correct.
Yeah.
Now we talk about the Vita sites. The
Yeah.
Vita sites, they are amazing sites, all Minnesota. Can you
Yeah.
explain to us how any regular person can access? How much is the maximum amount of money they can make a year in order to access to these free services?
Yeah, so for most of the volunteer income tax assistance sites, the VITA sites, for income wise, I've heard many of them do like individuals up to around 65 to 70,000, and then families a little bit more. It just depends on each site. Um, but the best way to find information about a site near you and, what their hours of operation are, and, the best way to get an appointment to find out if you income qualify is by going to the Minnesota Department of Revenue's website, revenue.state.mn.us, type in free tax preparation, and
Mhm.
then it'll come up with this database that lets you go by county of residence, area code, language, which is really great, so you can find those sites that support you the best. So I really recommend people go to that as a resource for finding those sites.
Perfect. Now you are a tax attorney. Now, what kind of cases you take in your organization, which is Meet Minnesota Legal Aid? And we understand Meet Minnesota Legal Aid is huge. They have so many different legal services, especially your
Um,
services, tax attorney. What kind of service Meet Minnesota Legal Aid offer in your office?
Yeah. So what's really great about the tax clinic is it is statewide. I always say that first and foremost. It's a statewide program. And then we're able to give advice regardless of income. And then we're able to represent if it's 250% or less of the federal poverty guidelines. And the areas that we help probably the most with are if people have questions about um, whether or not they can claim a dependent is, a popular question that we get, or what happens when they're audited for dependent credits. Um, we get a lot of some individuals that might have Schedule C expenses that were audited by the IRS. That does come up as well, with self employed individuals or independent contractors. Um, we also help with people who maybe they had a joint debt with a former spouse. they file jointly, but they, the debt is totally attributable to the other spouse and they shouldn't be held liable for it. It's called
Oh,
innocent
wow.
spouse. So we do help with those types of cases as well. If people are in, especially domestic violence situations, we're able to assist them navigate the tax process. Really, we help with anytime someone comes in, if they receive a letter from the IRS, and they're just
Mhm.
wondering what's going on with this letter, what does this mean, what should I do, we can answer those questions. And then we go to US tax court as well. So we are able to represent people in federal tax court.
Perfect. Now, you say you represent people when they are under 250% in the poverty line. For a lot of people, they don't understand exactly what that means. Can you explain to us how much is the maximum amount they can make in order to receive this kind of service?
Yeah, so for individuals, for a household of one, it's around $38,000 a year, and then
Okay.
it goes up, per household size. So, like, a household of two, is around 50,000. I know just off the top of my head, like I know, like like a family size of five, is closer to like 70,000, like that, those sorts of numbers. We look at, yearly amount, but, if people work seasonally, for example, then it's just kind of what does your average month look like? And when people call our intake, helps them determine what their income is like for eligibility purposes. So if anyone has, any sort of question, they can always call our intake and then be able to get information that way because we can always give advice. So we'll probably open up the case if it's something that's within our priorities, and then we can figure out level of service.
Perfect. Now, obviously, there's a question regarding when people get 1099s from creditors, right? They suppose you owe money, the account was charged off, now they send to you the 1099C. What does it mean for a lot of consumers?
Yeah, so a 1099-C is generally around like cancellation of debt income. So if someone, had a debt that was essentially written off, for example, then they would get the 1099-C. Well, cancellation of debt income is income.
Income,
And
okay.
so it is income that's listed on a tax return. So it's important to make sure that you have that 1099 available when you file your taxes. There is an exception. You list it on there as income, but there is an exception that if you are, I'm blanking out on the word, but if you are, uh, if you essentially, if your debts are more than your assets and income at the time, um,
Mhm.
then it there's a line on the tax return that allows you to kind of minus it out essentially. But you have to be insolvent. That's the word I'm looking for. You have to be insolvent at the time that the debt is written off.
Perfect. And what about if you get a 1099 for debt buyers, when the debt buyers technically got this debt from almost nothing? That is possible? Can you make a dispute about that?
Um, That's a little more outside the scope of tax. That's kind of more a consumer question.
Consumer
But
question.
yeah, we do have a consumer attorney. So that might be something that, yeah, if someone has a question more specifically about that.
Perfect. Now, the
Yeah.
other question we have for business owner, they say, well, last year, their business technically went down more of 60% of income, but they still have money. They technically try to appeal a settlement for all debt with the IRS. Then can reapply since they don't have income at this point?
Yeah, they can reapply. Yeah. Yeah. If there's a change in situation, you can definitely reapply and see what they say
This is
then.
working. Now, this other question is for people they are thinking not to make taxes this year, but obviously we encourage everybody. It's a lot of credits in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Use the credits.
Yeah.
Now, Lara, your site is able to work with people technically online or is just in person?
No, we're able to do online as well. We're able to assist people. A lot of what we do is over the telephone or, like a virtual visit, like things like that. You don't have to come into the office to be
That's
seen. Yeah.
perfect. And what kind of recommendation you have for people in order to prepare their taxes this year? Especially in this environment when people are a little afraid to go out. But what is your recommendation? Especially right now, we have online, as you say, there is a calls. What is your recommendation, Aisha?
Yeah. So I really, the free file programs are really great for if you and I know that some, sites out in the community kind of have like if you're able to kind of do it on your own and then they're there to offer some assistance. But if you want to do it 100% online, there are the free file programs which I really recommend using if you have pretty simple taxes, right? And you just like want to try to get advantage of the credits that you're due. You don't have a really complex tax situation, doing it online yourself. Use the free file. You don't have to like pay like H&R Block or TurboTax or anything like that if you have a simple tax situation. So I really recommend people utilize those. Otherwise, going to the volunteer income tax assistance sites, in the community, find one that's local, that's trusted. They're really great at being able to help you out. And some of them, I believe, there are some that will offer like online appointments or like drop offs. You just
Yeah,
have to find one that does that in your area.
that is perfect. Now we have another question. Uh, this question comes from a single mother, as probably you mentioned before. Um, the ex-husband get the credit for the kids, and she never received any credit. Obviously, it's really bad, but I don't know. What is your suggestion as an tax attorney?
Yeah, I think that I mean if you filed a tax return and you didn't get the credits or the refund amount that you anticipated, I always recommend, like, especially if it's like with the Minnesota Department of Revenue, they're really easy to get a hold of and contact and just like talk to an agent just to see what your situation is. If it's on a federal level, that gets a lot harder, trying to get a hold of
Yes.
a person on the telephone. So if there are credits that you feel like, you didn't get advantage of, you can always contact our clinic and we can look into it as well and offer advice on kind of steps you could take specifically with the credit that you might be looking at.
Well, and this specific question is regarding the ex-husband
Yeah.
got the credit for the kids, and the
Yeah.
spouse
And
not got
so, yeah. So that's where there's kind of a couple different ways where um like if a different spouse has claimed the children and they shouldn't have, you can actually there's two different things. Like if you're like if they beat you to the race, you can paper file your tax return and then you that would cause the IRS to audit both of you and you would just provide documentation showing that you should have been able to claim the children and get the credit. um if it's if you already are being audited, that's something where we can step in and help you, get the documentation to the IRS and do that. And there's also a way to report someone to the IRS. So if you're like someone claimed a dependent and they shouldn't have claimed them, you should audit them. Like you can put in a form as well with the
Oh,
IRS.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now the last question before we go. This question comes from this is a mixed family. This person have a social security. I'm sorry. This person have a team number, and the kids they have a social security number.
Hmm.
Now, with the new rules, this person is able to apply for credits or is not able.
On the Minnesota level, they should be able to because the children have social security numbers. On a federal level, um, I believe, yeah, with the changes, like I believe with the changes, they would need a social security number as well, not just an ITIN.
Yeah,
But that would definitely be something that, if you're going to a tax preparer, you can like specifically ask them, about like if there's a because there's differences between like the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, additional child tax credit. They have different requirements on them.
perfect, perfect. Okay, Isha, thank you so much for your time. We are going to see you next week because it's a series until the end of the month.
Yeah.
If you have questions, I know I have more, but since we don't have
Mhm.
much time, we are going to send to her. She is a tax attorney with Make Minnesota Legal Aid. We are, if you need to contact Meet Minnesota Legal Aid, we have in the chat. We are going to send the information via email to those people that are in Zoom. And thank you again, Aisha. Something else
Thank
you would
you.
like to say to our community?
No, just obviously stay safe out there with everything going on. And if you have, any legal needs, any legal questions, feel free to reach out to Mid Minnesota Legal Aid.
Of course. That's what we're looking for now. Thank you, Aisha. See you next week.
Thanks. See you next week.